You're listening to Relatable with Stephanie Michele, only on LA Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Relatable. I am your host, Stephanie Michele. I'm so excited to be here. We're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics today. But before we get there, yes, you are seeing shoulder pads. I am joyfully leaning into an 80s vibe today, and I'll explain why in a couple minutes. Today we're going to be talking about reframing the conversation, which you know is one of my favorite topics. Why? So what is reframing? I think I've talked about it before, but let's go over it. So reframing is the act of purposely looking at a topic or situation differently. Some of the tactics that we can use to reframe are taking the characteristics on of someone else and trying to approach it from their point of view or their situation to bring a different perspective to the conversation. Exploring new questions about the situation, or approaching the topic with a new point of entry. For example, reverse engineering it from the worst case scenario or desired outcome. Why and when should we reframe? Well, when is anytime talking points are stale and frustrating and not moving the situation forward. Why? Because sometimes reframing is the only way to achieve positive solutions, mutually positive solutions, rather. Reframing aids in understanding and relating. Although it is an important part of conversation, debating is not relating. When we focus too much on winning that debate, we miss the opportunity to find positive solutions. I mentioned earlier that I was leaning into an 80s vibe, and the reason why is I'm super inspired right now by the show Stranger Things on Netflix. Are you watching it?
I'm not.
Oh, we'll talk about it. It takes place in the 80s, and it's centered around a group of kids who are close friends and find themselves in a very scary situation. Now, I normally don't like to be scared, and I'm not that much of a fan of sci-fi, but the reason why I like this show is just vast. I mean, I absolutely love it. Number one, the show reflects a simpler time. There's no internet. There's no cell phones. The kids are their own source for entertainment, and their communication skills are exceptional. They listen to each other, they leverage each other's thoughts, feelings, and talents. And most importantly, this is why my heart just swells over this show, this is my heart swell, is they talk about leaning into journeys of curiosity. I dig that. They do this with each other, they do this to get themselves out of the scary situation that they're in. They continue to learn, grow, respect, and care for each other. I love it. What I'm experiencing right now in terms of how people are talking to each other online breaks my heart. When I experience people carrying those bad habits to their offline communication, I'm just sickened. We carry the heat and frustration of being misunderstood and disconnected into our personal relationships, making most of our conversations feel a lot harder than they need to be. Or we just lean into just one mode of communication when we do get together, and it's gossip, and it's gross, and it's yucky, and I want it to stop. So I know my guest today feels some of these same communication and conversational pains that I do. So let's meet her and get right into how we can reframe and expand the conversations that get stuck in the workplace. We're going to talk a lot about that, and in life. So meet Jaime Hansen.
Hi.
She's a writer, speaker, and thought leader on women in business with a degree in math and economics from Northwestern University. She began her career working for an economic consulting firm in Washington, D.C. After earned her MBA at Duke, woohoo, she made a career switch and spent the next 10 years as a business executive in the tech industries working for companies like Yahoo, Fox, and Cornerstone. Jaime is passionate about innovation and leveraging all available talents involving the intersection of business and social impact, and always new entrepreneurial ideas. Jaime is the author of Expanding the Conversation, a book about perspective, innovation, and leadership.
Yeah, thanks.
So Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm totally excited about this. Is one of my favorite topics, actually.
Me too.
Yeah, right? So before we get into it, I always ask, like, is there anything, when I talk about what's on my mind at the beginning of the show, it's my way of kind of clearing out the distractions or just like giving people an idea of like what I'm leaning into at this point. So is there anything that you just want to get off your chest and share before we jump into it?
No, I don't think so. Except one, I don't watch Stranger Things yet. I've heard amazing things about it. But when you said they're all about the journey of curiosity, is that how you said it?
Yes.
I love that because I think like the in-person interactions, doing things just because you're curious about them is often missing today. Yeah. And that's really important to maintain that curiosity.
I 100% agree. They get that in the show. I won't give any spoiler alerts because you haven't seen it. There's 2 seasons now, and I've seen them both. I mean, I have to admit, I binged the second one so hard. I was like, I was waiting for it. It's so cute. But they lean into the journey of curiosity because of their science teacher.
I think that's great.
Yeah, their science teacher really encourages them, and he's somewhat of a unspoken hero, in the show, and it's cool to like see not only are they valuing other people and adults and knowledge and science and facts, but each other. It's super cute. I highly recommend it. You'll have to tell me when you see it. All right. Well, so let's just get right into it. So you wrote a book about expanding the conversation.
Yes.
Why that topic for you?
Why that topic? So I've always been interested in empowering women, obviously. I've been in very male-dominated industries in my professional career, first as an economist and then in tech. Yeah. I've actually been very fortunate. So, I've been afforded great opportunity and haven't faced a lot of the sexism and all that. Right?
You never met Harvey Weinstein?
No, I've not met him and not understood it. So I've been really fortunate with a lot of things. But, I mean, of course I've seen differences. And I really felt it, I think, especially once I got engaged and married and started having kids, because a lot of things changed then. But my role in tech specifically I was not an engineer. Mm-hmm. I was always on the business side, primarily business development, strategy, and partnerships. So I had the chance to work with lots of partners, like all over the globe. So different types of industries and also different countries. Mm-hmm. And I saw a lot of differences in terms of how men and women lead, how they're received, how they respond to one another. And I just thought it was really interesting. And then, so I was just kind of observing. I don't even know that I was observing. Right. Or I knew that I was observing, but I just was. And then, the last, 5, 6, 7 years, there's been a lot of heightened rhetoric around this topic. Absolutely. Right? So we have Sheryl Sandberg, who's amazing. We have Hillary, right? I mean, don't even get me started in the last couple months. But, all of it has really been increased conversation, which is fantastic. Mm-hmm. But the numbers haven't changed, and I didn't understand why. And I'm like, well, we're talking about it now. 50 years ago, you could say, okay, it just wasn't on people's radar. Like, they weren't talking about it the same way. It wasn't a pervasive topic. Now it is. People have the awareness and the education, and it's still not changing. So my take on it was, I think we might be having some of the wrong conversations, and we are kind of talking into an echo chamber that we need to expand. Yeah. We need to start looking at things differently.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Wrong conversations. We 100% agree on that. So let's break down some of these topics that you cover in the book that could possibly be the wrong confirmation. And we're just going to get right into it because we've got a lot to cover. So affirmative action, what are the positive and negatives of leveraging affirmative action policies in the workplace?
So this is so interesting because, and I'm being totally honest, Stephanie, so I wrote the book and you've read my opinions in it. And since then, I do a lot of speaking engagements and sort of roundtables and talking with people. And I'm always interested in hearing different opinions. And I don't want to say that my perspective has changed, but I have learned a lot in terms of, I actually see that point in a different way. So there's Wait a second.
Yeah. How beautiful is that? Like, a human being admits they're human and allowed information to come in, and it changed how they felt about something.
Well, I don't know if that's going to sell the book.
But, it does, because it's like, this is I think if I'm going to learn from somebody, I want to learn from somebody that is seeking knowledge and growing. Yeah. And maybe that sells book too.
At first I was like, oh shoot, I can't say this now because I wrote the opposite, right? I researched and wrote a lot. But now I think that's exactly it. It's like, well, if I'm gonna I need to walk the talk. Is that what that's expression is? So I'm like, I talk about seeing things from different perspectives and keeping your mind open. Who am I if I can't do that also? So with regards to affirmative action and quotas, specifically as it relates to the workplace, right? there's been a lot of research that shows that doing things intentionally and saying we are going to aim to have 25% women or to have 3 executives be women or minorities or whatever the case may be. I personally have always been pretty anti-quotas in that regard. My take on it is I think if you're looking for that, I guess I should say it like this. I do not want to be hired for a position because I'm a woman any more than I don't want to be hired for a position because I'm a woman. So I'm like, to me, that doesn't work. That's contradiction, right? So that's really how I feel about it. And I think that people that are hired in those spots unfortunately have an asterisk by their name because they could be awesome. They could be completely qualified and the best person, bar none, for the job. But if they're getting the female spot or the minority spot or the whatever spot, then everyone's questioning, did they get, right?
Yeah,
like, why did they get the job?
I mean, you would hope, and I think the reframe here, the opportunity is maybe, hey, let's put the qualifications down and we hire the candidate that matches the qualifications the best. I wish I would have known you, Jaime, when the Google executive wrote the manifesto on? Because I had it ready. I wanted to just read it point for point, because I thought that was a really interesting
Me too. I could
example.
Talk about that for days.
Yeah, but it died so soon. I was like, I wish I could have somebody on and just talk about this.
But interesting enough, like I do not agree with so much of what he said.
Yeah.
But I am not anti him bringing the conversation to the forefront.
I agree. I actually, there were things in it that I agreed with and the things I didn't agree. I didn't agree with the approach, and I also see the bigger problems, like this poor guy, like he didn't have a buddy he could have ran that by before he just puts it out. Because typically when you write a 20-page manifesto, like, the crazy light kind of, I shouldn't say that, but the red alert goes on, and there's something more motivating this person, and there's concern, there's like some isolation, and I think there was a better way to get it out there.
That's exactly
and
right.
to your point, it put it out there, but it died right away because it took some of his influence away in the means of what's. And
it's a shame because not everything he said should have been discounted.
I agree with that.
But wait, going back to the quotas thing really quickly. So then I was doing a roundtable with a group of startup CEOs. And there was a woman who was a little bit older than me, maybe like she was seasoned, but she'd done several amazing companies, and now she was on, I think, her 3rd company or something, to the 2 previous ones being very successful. And she said, I disagree. And she said, I hear what you're saying. And she said, I often get the token female spot. She said, I'm a seasoned startup founder. I've been very good at this. Like, they often tap me to put me in whatever position, whether it's a board or some roundtable or whatever. And she said, and I know it. She said, I know I deserve to be there, but I also know that the reason I got the call was because I'm a woman, not because of my qualifications initially. And she said, and she goes, the people that are watching me, a generation behind, 2 generations behind, they're not going to know that. All they see is a woman standing up there, and she's like, so I'll represent. Like, the means justify the ends. I thought that was very interesting.
It's interesting.
Like, okay,
it's kind of take what you can get and then just try to walk and be the best example you can for people.
Exactly. Like, to me, it's kind of like the Google Manifest. Like, I think there's probably a better way, but I'm like, but I understand where you're going with this, and you're using it as an opportunity, so that becomes your voice,
Understood.
Yeah.
All right, let's keep moving. So ratio of, well done. Ratio of men and women executives. So media focuses on equal pay, glass ceilings, discrimination against working mothers. What else should we be talking about here?
So it's all involved. I hate the equal pay discussion, which is very controversial of me to say. I recognize that.
Did you say that in your book?
I did.
Okay.
I was like, and I framed that the wrong way. I don't hate it. I think it is being used the wrong way. So I think it's very, it's a sexy conversation. It's like, oh, women are only getting paid, 78, 79 cents per man. Well, that's actually not totally true. So that is true if you're comparing all men to all women.
Yeah, and when you averages lie, when you take
totally lie.
Like you can take the lump of every industry and maybe say something like that, but you break it down by industry and it might be totally wrong. Women might be making more, and I'm pretty sure that there are industries out there that women do. So yeah.
There are some, and it also depends on, like, yes, it's full-time, but there's a difference between full-time working 35 hours and full-time working 60 hours, and there's a difference between a full-time role as a secretary or as executive assistant versus a full-time role as a banker or with a PhD in neuroscience. I mean, I don't know why they would need that, but I'm just saying, you know. So I'm like, you know, there's different, it's not comparing apples to apples.
Yeah.
And then I think what's also left out of the conversation are the intangibles that are not necessarily wed to the finances. So when individuals take roles, they should be compensated accordingly, but there's different forms of compensation and they're not all financial. Sometimes it's flexibility, sometimes it's autonomy. I mean, it goes on and on, right? And until you look at the full package, I don't think it's fair to say you make less than he does and therefore everything's wrong, you know?
I hear you on that too, and I think what comes up for me, especially when you were talking, is how much feminist behavior and leadership gets rolled into this topic, and then there inevitably becomes this attack on men. Just on men or women. So men have come back and but
That's
what
exactly
about
right.
us? And it's like, this is where I talk about debating's not relating. Like, this is not helping. This conversation of we have to win here, whichever side automatically creates a losing situation for the other side. And of course, those two parties are not going to engage in conversation when that is the dynamic.
That is exactly right. And then it silos the conversation further, which doesn't advance it. And I get it. It's very, it's a good soundbite to say the wage gap and to have, what do they do, the equal pay day, where at some point in the year, okay, now women, you have to work this much harder to get pay. I mean, it's very propaganda, in my opinion.
I'm glad you said soundbite too, because this is a little pet peeve of mine. It's a soundbite. This is the world that we live in. We devour soundbites like popcorn when we watch a movie, and in doing that, we create a situation we don't have all the facts, and then it's summarized data, and then now we're arguing with each other 100%. Over this, and it's just so wasteful.
Yeah.
It's so wasteful and harmful, just harmful to your personal system.
Well, and it's common nature to defend your point.
Absolutely.
So if someone's attacking you, you're going to become defensive, and you're going to become more wedded to the argument than you might have not have been if you could have actually been like, but wait, did you actually consider it from this side?
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely common nature. It's like what our political system was based on, but it just
polarized.
doesn't. But it doesn't seem to work. It's like, how do you you hear the agenda is always bringing, especially politically, you hear the agenda is how do we cross over into the different parties, or how do we bring them both together? If they know that that's where the solution exists, it's how can we get there faster and stop having these situations where someone's always on the defense?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
We could talk about that for a long time. All right, let's keep going. So, state of entrepreneurship in the U.S. Is it thriving or a myth?
So this is such a good question. I don't know the answer, right? So, I mean, we talk about America being the land of opportunity and that we're all in favor of small businesses and growing entrepreneurships, but the reality is that nowadays, the vast majority of individuals work as employees in large companies. And I mean, look at all of the conglomeration that's happening, right? With Amazon buys Whole Foods, and Qualcomm and Broadcom. Is that happening? I mean, they're all different monopolies, right? They're just getting bigger, and there's a lot of power. And yet, I think instinctively we all want to believe that we are this country of both innovation and opportunity, which thrives in entrepreneurship. So I kind of think the jury's still out, to be honest with you. I think that's a huge opportunity for women, where women can create their own businesses and prove them that they're valuable and grow them into whatever they want to.
Yeah.
So that's where I get excited.
So what comes up for me, because I am an entrepreneur and an owner of a small business, is you almost have to, and maybe this is just me, so I'm just going to claim this as my own, but I have found that I almost have to completely separate myself from whatever agendas are going on in our political climate, because I'm usually not the I'm the exception to some of the things that are going on, like healthcare. I'm not paying full-time employees, so it's never going to be the masses that they address with the issues never really apply to me. Yeah. So I just have to kind of go, I can't expect any of that. I think as being an entrepreneur, you have to understand that you're actually forging the way in every possible way. Like, you're going to wear many hats, and you can't accept that you're going to get any kind of handouts. Like, you just have to be willing to know, like, if I choose entrepreneurship, I'm kind of on my own.
Yeah.
I'm kind of on my own.
It's hard.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the reality. Is I think that people go towards larger corporations and being an employee because it is easier. It's, I mean, first of all, it's generally more lucrative, right? At least in the near term. But it's also they're being told what to do. You are making a gazillion decisions every day. You're probably screwing up half of them, right? And then you just keep going. Like, you keep going forward. You are building something. And I think that's what most Americans pride ourselves on. It's like, that's the heart of this country. That's who we want to be and be known for. And yet we don't necessarily show that in how we value it. Yeah. You know?
Yeah, and I mean, there is a large percentage of entrepreneur or startup businesses that don't make it past the first year. Like 70 or 80% don't, because they didn't consider all the extra things that you're going to do and don't understand, and might even have a little chip on their shoulders that they thought that they would get more help, but it really wasn't there. And it's like, that's from like, hey, most of the ones that I know just said, you know what, that stuff's not available to me.
Yeah.
As a woman, and I think that we're getting into this topic right now, like, finance for women is really hard for entrepreneurship. It's like, they go through different loops than.
Very, very hard. So this is something that I care about deeply, especially since, which I didn't before, not that I didn't care about it, I didn't know about it. And then researching the book, so venture capital is obviously a huge industry, and in this country, less than 3% of venture capital dollars go to women. Like, that just blows my mind. I'm like, is this for real? I'm like, are you telling me that like 3% of the population has good ideas and that are women? I'm like, that doesn't even make sense, right? Intuitively. But I mean, there's reasons for it, right? It's who's doling out the money, not typically women, right? So it's natural to give money and to give access to where you relate. And when you don't, it's more difficult to see that. But that's where, again, I think women do have, we need to fight for that, and I think it's a unique opportunity. I want to go back to one other thing you were talking about too, with the entrepreneurship. I think before, I mean, I don't know, in years before, whatever, people would think of entrepreneurs and say, oh, you are going to work like a dog. You're going to work 23 hours a day. You're going to have no life. And I think that scared women too, right? So it was like, you can't help with the kids. You can't, I mean, women are caretakers. So if you have aging parents, like, you're not going to be able to help that. You're not going to be able to do anything. And it scared a lot of women, right? And now I think that that's changing, where I know so many female founders who are like, I am working my butt off, and I'm going to work on my time. So maybe I'm going to work 23 hours, or maybe I'm going to work 15 hours a day, but they're going to be the 15 hours that I choose. And maybe this day I'm going to work 3 hours, and tomorrow I'm going to work 23 hours. And they're really like taking control of it in a different way, which I think is really inspiring.
Yeah, I do too. And I think in that case too, I hate to make broad generalizations, but in general, we think that women are more nourishing and sometimes better at making plans or tackling details. And so in that case, it's like, well, you understand pretty quickly like where you can where you can find help in certain areas.
Have to,
so
right?
You have to be resourceful.
Totally.
I mean, whether you're a mom or not, like you learn.
Oh, it's born out of necessity.
Nobody's helping me on this. Like if I want it done, I'm gonna, I got to figure out a way to get it done.
Well, it's a quality of a hustler, right? I mean, that's which is a good thing, right? I mean, entrepreneurs have to hustle, and women tend to be really good hustlers. Yeah.
And communicators too, because really, so again, like if you're working this way, and I totally can relate to this conversation, you have to, you can't burn yourself out because then you are your only you. If you've got to get the stuff done the next day, it's you can't allow yourself to burn out, and so you have to really manage even your self-care to keep everything going. It's like this task I'm not good at. Like I know so much about myself because I'm an entrepreneur. I know my best times to do writing. I know my best times to communicate or negotiate a new contract with with a client. I know my best time for just task work. I know my best time to work out and take care of myself. Because I've had to figure that out to keep the funnel going, to get up and do it again. So you learn.
You do.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think you had to learn, right? Yeah. It wasn't something that you just decide, oh, I know exactly how this is going to lay out. You learn as you go.
You experiment and you fail at.
Yeah.
I mean, you fail because and you allow that to like, okay, yeah, that wasn't so great, but you allow that to be the learning curve that you like, well, now I know I won't touch that stove again.
Right.
I've got this now. I can add another layer and, you know, and keep moving.
But that's something that I think, and I do not think this is innate, just to be very clear, but I think from a society perspective, I think women have been taught not to fail, that we are not supposed to, that we're always supposed to be looking a certain way and acting a certain way, and you can't fail in that way. And I think that is detrimental in a lot of areas, but especially in business.
Yeah,
you know?
I experience it. I'm pretty like this is what you get. You know, I love the character of Eeyore from what is that? What do you do? Or Sadness. You know, Sadness for instance. It's like this is what I have. This is who I am. Yeah. I have no, I have no qualms admitting like the thoughts that I have. And it's weird, like, how different people respond to that. Because they're like, is she really is she joking? Is she trying to get attention? It's like, no, I'm just like, no. It's actually just how I release it and move on. It's like, I'm human, you know? And if I can find a way to release some of those failures faster, I get up faster. Yeah.
But I think that's so important also from the communication standpoint, because I think people will feed off of that. Like they learn from that and they say, okay.
Not all. Some will take advantage of it.
Not all, like, but some will be like.
Oh, vulnerability.
Yeah, but some will be like that you're okay with that and be like, okay, then I'm okay with that too. Yeah. You know, like I'm not going to have to be perfect all the time.
Ultimately for me, and like, I don't know if it was like a choice per se, or it's just like what felt more comfortable is I feel the more authentic I am, the more authentic the people are around me, and we all feel better. Like everybody's working better, you know, and like when you can just go, oh, I can be myself here. Like that doesn't mean you can be lazy and not do your job, but it's just like, but you can be yourself.
I 100% agree with that. Yeah. So I think part of that's where the conversation has gone awry too, honestly. I mean, again, I love the increase in this conversation of women in business and work and all of that, but I think the latest round of it, let's again 5-10 years whatever, has really been teaching women or telling women to behave a certain way. I call it outmenning the men. Yeah. And look, for the women that works for, like that's great. Like if that's who you are, fantastic, absolutely run with it. But that's not who everybody is, and if you can't be your authentic self, it just doesn't work. Yeah. I mean, first of all, it's exhausting. Like nobody can keep that up forever, right? And second of all, I think you're right. Like it doesn't ring true. And especially when you look at the millennial generation, they're going to spot that insincerity from a mile away, right? And they're like, not happening. They don't actually care if you're crazy as long as they're being you know?
They like uniqueness. That's true.
So that's where I think authenticity is really important.
I haven't shared this ever on the show, but it's definitely the reason why I am not in a corporate situation and why I left it, because I was pretty fast-tracked in positions early on, 25, 26, was the fact that, you know, there were things said to me and done to me. I definitely have the Me Too situations that I could share that created a situation where I might have been hired because I was a cute girl that, you know, was going to be fun to work with, but I actually knew my stuff, you know, like, and I actually it was measurable, you know, like what I was doing was like it was affecting companies. And so there was this a couple situations where it's like, oh, you can't be cute and smart. Like that's not gonna. You're gonna have to pick one, you know. And what I did in that time, you know, 26-year-old, 25, was I picked smart, and I would dress down. I mean, like just completely, like just take like cover up, like khakis and a black shirt, like because I thought that was like what I was going to have to do, and I was like so uncomfortable, and like I had to really go through. I spent probably most of my 30s figuring out exactly what that balance was going to look like. Yeah. And now in my 40s, it's like, oh, I know who I am. Like I know who I am. I know how I work. I know my value. I'm as authentic as I possibly can be, and it feels great.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I take us off topic for one quick second? Yeah. Because you just reminded me. Yeah. So I'm working on this article that. This is gonna like blow your mind, but it's talking about the Kardashians, okay, and could they possibly be seen as the new feminists, like the new American feminists? And I was talking around with some of my friends, and my friends are like, you can't talk about that. Like you cannot actually say that.
You can't put that out.
All your credibility. And I said, why? And one of their arguments was like, look at the way they dress. Like and I was like, aren't you like going against everything that this is supposed to be about? Like they dress differently than I dress, right? But they like that. Yeah. Like why shouldn't they be able to dress like that? They own it. And by the way, they've built business empires. Like, they could teach classes on this stuff. They should, actually, right? And they are very, I mean, you could make the argument they're faker than fake in some cases, but in many cases, they're actually very authentic. It's just a different authenticity than what a typical feminist is. Yeah. And I think that's throwing a wrench in the conversation from a feminist perspective.
Well, the challenge, I think, in that, I'm glad you went off topic because I like this. I like this little disrail. I think the challenge in that is, so when we see a woman, and this is a woman conversation, I'm not going to say all, well, some men may feel this way too. But when we see a woman displaying what she feels is sexy, if you're not checking how you feel about it or identifying your own role in it, and this is a big thing, like everything that we do, you got to check, hey, what's my role to the situation? What's my reaction? If you if you look at this person and go, well, that defines sexy, and not make your own definition of it, you're probably going to have a problem with it. Yeah. You know, but you have to go like, well, that's how she wants to look sexy, or be a female, dress like a female. That's fine for her. Maybe it's not fine for me, but she has just as much right dressing that way as I do in yoga pants or whatever, you know.
Well, and you're right, like, because women are just at fault in here. Like, it tends to be a conversation of men versus women, or
and women versus men, and consumers, or consumerism in brands.
Absolutely,
it's like you watching something and going, oh, I have to buy this product. Right. You know, you can't buy everything that people are selling. You know, you have to make a determination of 100%. Like what fits.
But that's also like knowing yourself too, right? And being allowed, like, it's being allowed to be different in the world, whether it's business or otherwise, but that there's not just one prototype that has to work and rise the ladder, or like go up the ladder. Yeah. There's different models that work for both leadership and just individuals. Yeah.
And be prepared to like explain what that is, you know, without having to defend it. It's just like, well, this is who I am. You
Absolutely,
know, like, or the best way, like when these conversations come up, like, you know, we've all had someone say, opposite sex or same sex, oh, you're wearing that? Yeah. It's like, oh, thank you for paying attention. Thank you. Like, why do I even have to address that? Yeah, I am wearing this. This is what I chose. Like, I don't even have to address whatever's going on here that you now are judging what I'm wearing. Yeah. You know, like, that's on you, buddy. Like,
I did this like seminar. It was this woman who's fabulous, and she's older. She's very seasoned, and she goes all around the world helping executives work on their executive presence, right? So she's very about aesthetics, but that's her job. Like, she's supposed to be, right? And I was in this session, and it was a group of women, so me and some younger women and across the board. And one of the women in the audience asked a question about aesthetics for your hair or something, I don't know. And this woman said, you cannot wear your hair longer than shoulder length if you want to be taken seriously. And she said, if your hair is longer, you have to wear it in a ponytail, but it cannot be longer than shoulder length to be taken seriously. And all these women next to me are writing down these notes. I bet. And I'm sitting there and I was like, is she for real? Like, did you just tell me that my value comes from the length of my hair? Right. And I was like, absolutely not. And I'm like, this cannot be the best advice that we have to offer. Yeah. This is the wrong conversation. You know?
I've been to, that reminds me, I've been to a couple women's events recently, and I actually stopped going. I'm not like, you know, I'm, for a couple of reasons. One is I think there's a lot of baby bird feminists out here that are like saying things to women and like things like that, you know what, you're going to have to unlearn in 5 or 6 years if you really want to like be authentic and feel good and do your best you. And I just can't stand it. I like sit in these things and going, you know, maybe this is like maybe I'm being an age, it's like ageist or something, because I'm like, I'm going to be 45 next month. I'm listening to this stuff and going, if I heard that, you know, at 25 or 26, I'd be a fucking mess. Like, I would be, like doing things in response to that. Yeah. And it's like, that's such bad advice. So I stopped doing that. And I think I stopped going to women's events. There's maybe one in LA that I'll still go to because of that. And then sometimes the attack on the other side. It's like, honestly, if we're going to move things forward, like, I don't want to silo into a sex. I want to like go, hey, it's good to have like women that are going to prop you up, but you still are going to be in the business world or in the world with men, and you need to learn how to communicate with them too. And like,
and there's value there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, let's not make men the enemy. They're absolutely
they're not.
No,
they're not.
You know?
They're not. Yeah. So stop doing that. All right, let's keep going. What conversations do you recommend executives to lead to help move, change the conversation, create a more thriving workforce. Like,
I think that's a really hard one.
Okay.
Because I think our society, we're so litigious that I think executives, male or female, need to be concerned about lawsuits. And, they have their HR department being like, you cannot say this. And I think it's really harmful, honestly, because, they can slap a sexual harassment video and say this is mandatory training for everybody. But, that does nothing. And until they have, like, a real conversation about it, that can't change. And I'll give you an example from, so I have 3 kids.
Okay.
And so every time that I was pregnant, I was working for a large corporation. So like I said, I had a very lucky, like I had, great maternity leave. I was very fortunate with all that. But with all 3 of my pregnancies, I didn't tell anybody until I was at least 5 months pregnant. And with my last one, I had my last 2 at the same company. But at my last one, I didn't tell them till I was almost 6 months pregnant. I don't show till like later, which is great. And it was winter, so I could wear like big stuff. And also my boss at the time was remote, so that was an advantage.
That helped.
Yeah.
That helped.
So finally at 6 months, I had the conversation with him. And I knew why I wasn't telling him, because I didn't want to be taken off the good projects or, stop the travel. I wanted to make sure that I was in it until I couldn't be.
Yeah.
So I certainly knew my side of the equation. And then I told him, and my boss at the time was older. He had grown children. Lovely man.
Yeah.
And so I told him on the phone, and he said, oh. And then he was like, congratulations, that's wonderful. And he said, 3 months? Like, you're having the baby in 3 months? And I said, yeah. And it wasn't until then that I realized, oh, I just screwed him. You know, like, because he had chosen me to be on certain projects and lead certain teams. And now I've left him scrambling, and he can't be obnoxious about it because that's terrible, right? Yeah. And he can't even be disappointed, but he's allowed to feel these things, and we couldn't even have an open conversation. And it's not that I regret doing what I did, but I was like, like, this could have been such a different opportunity had I gone about it differently, and we had an open conversation where I said, I don't want to lose these things, but let me help you prepare for when I'm gone.
But the challenge is such a great example. Is like, how can we have preventative, safe communication around these topics? Because you could open that up, like, hey, I'm married, I have a kid, I'm probably going to have another. Can we form a committee and kind of talk about what this looks like? So the projects and the work is protected, but my position is protected too. And like, I want to give you advance time, and I want to do what's best for the company, but I also have to look out for myself based on all of these situations that
I think he would have understood, honestly. It was just a conversation.
That's a tough one.
It was a tough one, but I think, like, that's the point where it's like, if executives can acknowledge, oh, like, I can understand why some women would be feeling this, or men too, that, frankly, yes, some companies have paternity leave, but there's still a sort of a stigma for some men in terms of taking that, and there's different expectations, and that's hard too, So I think it's about finding a way to have much more open conversations, and I think the only way that that's really going to change in the short term is if the executives lead by example and risk the vulnerability and risk putting it out there. Easier said than done.
I like the phrase risk the vulnerability because it often feels a little uncomfortable in the moment, but it always opens the conversation up to more authentic communication and possibly solutions around it. But
well, and the Google Manifesto was a perfect example. I mean, again, it was tough because there's so much in there that you're just like, oh my gosh, really, you can't just said that, But there were pieces of it. I mean, clearly this was like a young white man who was either feeling threatened or defensive over his job and not getting things. Like, I mean, I don't think you want to alienate young white men. Do you know what I mean? I think, like, great, bring your concerns to the table. Let me explain to you why these women are all completely capable, or minorities, or whatever the case may be. But you have concerns. Let's talk about them openly versus you're out and we're going to, make you a pariah, the next day.
It's like what's not happening is the marker on some of these situations of just going, let's mark this one and let's form a committee. Let's get a group of people together that are coming from diverse situations and see, like, if there's anything we can do to help this next situation when it happens.
And to learn from it. Helpful. Like, it's not everything's going to always fall one way, and then sometimes there's situations where there isn't a compromise, right? But at least talking about it, I think, I think transparency really helps. I think that people can live with not getting their way when they understand the rules and there's transparency around.
I like the idea. I've thought about this a lot. I've done corporate culture work, really working on that. And I like the idea, based on some of the situations that I've seen, and all companies are different, all cultures are different, but it would almost, I can almost see a case, not almost, I can see a case for a therapist that is not, that's kind of independent, that the corporation is paying but is technically not on their payroll, that actually can be the liaison for the employee to kind of talk about some of these things, and then not reveal that, but go back to a leader and go, I think what would be helpful as a group, I'm not going to tell you.
Everything you say is confidential, but let me help you bring it to the forefront.
A mediator,
in a helpful way.
Permanent mediator that has some sort of therapy background, I think would be really helpful. To move cultures forward.
Well, and it's without fear of the negative repercussions.
Absolutely.
And that's what I think is people are afraid of speaking.
Absolutely. So we talked about the workforce. Let's just talk about what's going on in the world right now.
There's a lot.
Yeah, right. We won't be able to cover all of it, but what comes to mind when I say how could what topics that are out there right now could benefit from a reframing or expanding the conversation? What do you see that the talking points are just stale and just frustrating everybody, and there's no movement?
Yeah, so again, I already talked about the wage gap because I think that's a big one as it relates to business. Mm-hmm. I think the sexual harassment one's obviously coming to the forefront right now, which I think is fantastic, not just because we live in LA, but because it's breaking open a dialogue. And it's funny, we mentioned sound bites and we were sort of anti them, but look, this is not unique to Hollywood, these problems.
No.
But the reason why, look, it happened in Silicon Valley just a couple months ago and sort of died down quickly. Look at politics even right now, right? But I think the reason it's getting so much play and that it's continuing, and I don't think it's ending anytime soon, is because these are celebrities, right? It's sexy, it's provocative, it's out there, and so I have no problem with that. I'm like, great, let's use that. But I think there's a lot of different threads to draw from this conversation. One of them that I have not seen really brought up yet is sort of the accountability and culpability piece, where Louis C.K., did you see his apology? I thought it was a really good apology. I think he I think he should have been fired. He was. Netflix dropped him. They did all the right things, and still he came out and said, I own this, and I need to listen now instead of talk. And look, if I were one of the women harmed by him, I think that's where a question of forgive and forget. I don't know that you can do that. There's some scars that are just too deep. But I think let's use this as an opportunity. Is that a real apology, and what are we looking for in an apology? Because saying I'm sorry and going to sex rehab the day after, you're just I'm so not buying this, And then saying I'm suing the publication that said I did this, but I'm really sorry. Well, that doesn't work either. So I think talking about that is important. And so that's one thread, I guess.
Taking responsibility, for your action.
But what does that look like, I guess? And
are both people sides
allowed to screw up?
Right? I women are going to hate me for saying what I'm thinking I'm saying, but I'm just going to put it out there. Because it's such a sexy soundbite right now, everybody's definition of sexual harassment is a little bit different. Someone could accuse someone just for looking a certain way, And so we got to kind of be responsible and check in, I think, on that too. It's not just about the accuser, and his actions. It's what does this really look like? Let's revisit what it is, unwanted touch or comments, and is it, when someone, how far even is that? And if you shut someone down right away, that's not appropriate,
right? And
they don't do it again, are you going to accuse that person and ruin their career,
right?
If they do it again and it escalates, it's maybe a different story. But I think that needs to be in this conversation too.
There was one case, I can't remember who it was, but it was a woman who got angry. She was going through security, TSA at the airport, and the TSA agent said to her, oh, you look nice, and she took severe offense to that, and we were just I was kind of okay, I don't know. Like that to me is like, that's like, he's not, I mean, I guess he's in a position of power. Like he could not let you through, but it's a little bit, you know what I mean?
I actually, like on a recent trip this year, I heard a woman like calling her friend and saying, you know, just in a really derogatory manner, talking about how the TSA person like patted her down and how he's getting off on it. And I was like, you know, I'm going to be real and authentic and honest about this. And the way she was talking, it was, I was being really judgmental. I'm like, I know that didn't happen. Like, same guy patted me down. He was very nice. He was very respectful. Like,
don't women have to pat down women?
Yeah,
and men
maybe it was a woman too. I don't even know, but I just remember her talking about it in such a way that I'm like, yeah, I think you're exaggerating. Right. You know, like it's, you know, they're doing their job. Like, come on.
Or when some people get upset, like, oh, that guy asked me out. Well, I mean, that's dating. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a difference. But when your boss,
but when your Uber driver asks you out, that's still, you know, that's a little different.
Agreed. And like, and if it's your boss, like, they can't ask you out. I agree. There's a line that they should not make you even feel like you have to consider where the answer is. But if it's like this guy at the bar and he comes up to you and he's like, "You're hot. You want to go out?" I mean, I'd probably say no to that approach. But like, he's just a guy asking a girl out. Exactly. You know, I think there are differences there.
Yeah. This is why, so, you know, we could talk about this from now until the end of the year. This is why that I really advocate during this time of like so much information being at us at all times and the sound bites and the social media and the phone and is that I feel it's really, really important to form some sort of offline group. Whether it be your book club, you can call it what you call it. You can call it Bible study, you can call it, you know, small group meeting, you can call it book club, or you can just call it your offline group. But I think it's super important for us to get somewhere in a group of people that we trust. We don't have to all agree, you know, on the same things, but have a regularly scheduled offline conversation about what's in your system. You know, what are you dealing with at work? What are you dealing with in the world that you just can't process? Because there's so much trauma, and I think partly people just kind of running that, you know, well, you fight, what is it? Fight, freeze, or fleet?
Fight or fleet.
But fight, fleet, or freeze. There's another one where you just do nothing. Okay. Yeah. So you fight it, you debate it out, which is tense. Like then you're carrying that like animosity. You just go away, and then you're still carrying it if you don't get to talk it out, or you freeze. I can't talk about this. I can't deal with this topic. Like, and I really, really just feel so strongly that we would all benefit by just having a regular meeting with a group of people, you know, a little bit of family, a little bit of friends, neighbors, whatever, that you can talk this stuff out. Yeah.
I have a friend who is in a YPO group, and they meet, I think, monthly, maybe once a month or once every 6 weeks. And they discuss the top 5 and the bottom 5% of what's going on. And it could be anything. It could be personal or professional, but it's like, there's always the middle. Let's go with the extremes, the best and the worst, and just like get it out there and be very vulnerable and it's all confidential. Yeah. So it's safe.
Put a topic, you know, do it in an organized manner. Put a topic in the hat and draw out. You know, like I want to talk about this, but I don't necessarily want to be the one that's like, you know, getting credit for it. But I think it's super important because this does move things forward. We are connected, and when we can listen to other perspectives, like, we grow, you know, and then there's some opportunity to do something about it. But when we can't even listen, that's where the problem starts to happen. We're going to switch gears. Is there anything else that you want to say on this topic before we?
No, I'm good.
You're good? It was so great. I want to have you back. We'll talk about this much more. So what I do on Relatable is, you know, I want to give the example that any given time our conversation can change, the circumstances on how we're relating can change, and there's always more information available. So we know a little bit about what you're passionate about, but we don't know Jaime yet.
True.
Okay. So I have just a box of random questions. They're kind of goofy, and I have a book, and you can choose box or book, and I'm going to ask you a question randomly from one of them.
Okay, let's go with box.
The box? Okay. It's called Not Your Mother's Table Not Your Mother's Dinner Party.
Is this like truth or dare?
Some of them are, actually. Yeah, no, I don't want to go that far. Okay. Are we more likely to receive proof of alien life or God? It's a fun question. I don't know if I've ever pulled it.
I feel like the really spiritual people would say God.
Well, what would you say? How do you feel?
I would probably say alien life.
You'd probably say alien? All right. Let me give you one more. Apparently that's happened, you know. What's your guiltiest pleasure?
Ooh, that's a good one. I probably dessert, I guess. I I'm not an eat dessert every day person. I'm an eat dessert every meal. Like I just have a major sweet tooth.
Me too.
Yeah.
I somehow subliminally in my head, I was like, chocolate. She's going to say chocolate.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I got it. I am too. All right. Well, so the last thing that we do on Relatable is what I call Heartswell. And it's just an opportunity for the guests to share a tribute or give a shout out to someone that's really made a difference in their life, and you just really want to say something meaningful to them. Could be a group of people, could be a person.
Do I have to name them? Or?
You could say like their first name,
Okay.
you know, whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay.
The reason that I like doing this and I ask people to do this is just to show that sharing deep feelings and emotion is not so scary, and you know, it's good to be a little bit vulnerable, and we tend not to share that, like, you know what, you mean something to me, you know, so I want to give everybody an opportunity to do that and hear that. I want the audience to kind of hear what that looks like.
Okay, so I was actually going to, like you said, is kind of going to go in a different direction, but now can I do two people?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's funny that you said like the offline relationships too, and I think this is sort of plays into the female versus male friendships. My husband and I talk about this often. I think one of the best advantages to being a woman today is that I think we've been conditioned like through culture that we value friendships in a different way, and I think men are really missing that, and I actually feel for them in that regard. So I guess this would be a specific shout out to Mina and Dana, who are two of my actually more recent friends in the last year or so, but I've just been very lucky. I've been able to talk to them in a way that I haven't been able to talk to some other people, and they make me see things really differently. They're tough on me sometimes. They call me out, and it's hard to hear.
I like friends like that.
But they always have my best interest, and I know that, and so that it makes it safe.
Yeah.
It's just very.
I'm
very lucky.
It's a friendship shout out today.
Friendship
I dig it a lot. I dig it a lot. Yeah, we don't tell, you know, it's like we don't tell our friends how important they are to us.
Yeah.
Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I feel like we'll be talking some more. That, you know, there's just some openness and like that we share about like bringing some of these things to light. And I hope
and
to see
they're tough topics. Like they're not going to change overnight. That's the reality, you know.
No, but they don't get less tough by not talking about them or arguing. Them, you know, trying to debate everything. So I thank you. So Jaime's book again is called Expanding the Conversation. She can be reached at Expand the Convo. I love that you say convo too, because I do too. So she can be reached at expandtheconvo.com. And of course, as always, I will share in the archives of the show where you can get the book and links to the website. So I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it was awesome. Next show, I'm really looking for. I've had some good ones lately. Next show, I'm going to have an ER doctor in the studio that she's gonna go on record to talk about the opiate epidemic, and she's going to share what she's seen in the ER, and she's really passionate about getting this information out. So I'm really looking forward to speaking with her. That's going to be great. And I'd say, so the social challenge of the week, always issue something to get people to try. I talked about offline groups last week. I don't think you're going to hear me stop talking about that anytime soon, so I really encourage people to do that. We're going into the holiday season. You're going to be seeing it, family and friends start talking to people about, like, hey, what is it? Would you want to do this? Would you want to meet on a regular basis? Maybe it's bi-monthly or monthly. And start, you know, assimilating that group, because I think it's really important. I think it's going to be something that we need going forward to get through all the news and information. So I'm encouraging that still. And then reframing, you know, explore some reframing. If you've been in a tough situation with a coworker or family member and you just keep arguing about the same thing, like, try to see if there's a way, like, to either approach it from their shoes, and sometimes you have to ask questions. Why do you feel this way? Yeah. Is there a certain situation that makes you feel this way? You know, to be able to kind of go, oh, now I see it. I'm really encouraging that, you know, to experiment with reframing. You know, let the other person know that you're going to do that. Invite them to do it with you. Like, let's try to see things from a different point of view. Sometimes, I will admit, the sensitivity of just the two people might be too tough to try to switch places. So maybe introduce a third kind of characteristic. Well, let's make a hypothetical character and like approach it from them. That might be a safer way. So you might have to try that. If you need any tips on that or have any questions or, you know, have a specific situation that you want to run by me, you can always reach out to me at Relate with Steph on Facebook or Instagram, and Love More Now on Twitter. So we can talk about that. And that does bring us to the end of this show. I'm just going to sign off, as I always sign off, and just say relate with more curiosity. That's what I want to encourage. Curiosity is a gift. Let's look at it that way as we approach the holiday season.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're listening to Relatable with Stephanie Michele, only on LA Talk Radio.